Welcome, Live 365. This is Darth Matter Radio. No matter where you may be in this beautiful world of ours, whether you are in Canada, North America, whether you are in Mexico or the great South America. We have listeners over there in Britain, Australia, places in Africa. We even picked up some listeners over there in the war-torn Russia and Ukraine area. And we take the people over there in India. This is going to be a show. We have the master of history. We have a chief of all chiefs. And today we're going to be discussing something the world doesn't want you to know. And that is Tulsa and the massacre of the real indigenous beings of the Americas. Welcome. Could you please introduce yourself? We have Chief Blue Feather.
Greetings, this is Chief Blue Feather, Dr. Tate with Coosa Nation of North America.
Yep, and we have Shadow Wolf.
Greetings, this is Jamil Shamsuddin, better known as Shadow Wolf.
And thanks a lot for being here today. Well, thank you, and we're going to be talking about a subject that you have brought up, Shadow Wolf, Chief, and it is about the wars that took place in America, and most people think about Tulsa, something that happened back in, I believe it was 1929. 1921, okay. And where this was the first time in American history that an Air Force was employed to bomb its own soil. Could you say it was its own soil if it was bombing? But it came from, the attack came from the air, came from the ground, and it came from the sea, the river that was there near Tulsa. And from my accounts, from the first stories that I read, there were over 35 to 3,600 people that were massacred, along with almost 1,000 businesses, completely destroying an economic powerhouse that was connected to other economic powerhouses around the Americas. So if we can start, just give us a little bit of background on how you got into this subject, Shadow Wolf and Chief.
Okay, so as you know, Chief, I wrote the book, Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy, and followed up Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy with the next episode, which is I Told You, Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy, which I separated the riots and massacres and wars that took place on American soil to show the disregard for the American people from the colonizers, basically. And then I showed how in that book, the people that we call Native Americans today are a new transplant that was agreed upon to take the place of the American Indian.
Sure.
Sure. And that's what did Napoleon say, that history is a bunch of lies agreed upon.
Yeah, and well, that's what prompted us to deep dive further into the massacres that occurred on our motherland. In our motherland, we had a commemorative ceremony Wednesday in honor of Mother Fletcher, one of the last survivors of the Tulsa quote-unquote riot massacre of 1921, and took it as an opportunity to show our students that these massacres are a continuum of genocide against the American Indian, but they don't, they just drop Tulsa on us, they drop the 60s on us, certain time frames they drop on us, but they never connected back to the history of antiquity to show this has been an ongoing assault. In fact, up until this day, it has never stopped. And we can talk about, I guess, we look at what's going on up until today, modern day is the mass incarceration. Modern day is the aerosol stratospheric injections in the sky. It's taking the land to create data centers. So there's still, the massacre has never ended, basically. And the war against us has never ended.
So why was Tulsa so important? What did it really represent here in the Americas?
So if you look at the Tulsa situation itself, you had a prominent group of people who literally had homes, courthouses, they had hospitals, they had everything that basically outdone the populations outside of that area, which was all Indian territory, which people don't understand. And so that jealousy and envy sparked the destruction of those people, because that was the new Wall Street. They had money flowing in and out. If you remember, and I don't know if you've seen this or not, Solomon Jones, he did a documentary back in 1925, of that area and the oil wells and things that were there that were black owned. This is where that aggression came from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you use the term black, what are you really referring to? What does that really mean?
So that colloquium is easier to accept today. Black is void. It's not a valid word, but most people associate themselves with black. Where if you take something that's black and put it against your skin, you see that's not real. But it is the accepted word for a people today.
So originally, would it be coppered colored that we should be saying, or what would...
Shade of brown, we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's from its inception, they called us the copper colored race because that's what they saw. A brown, reddish people in all tones, from the lightest of light to the darkest, all having a red undertone.
Sure.
So these people over there in Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, what kind of people were they? Were they the rich white people that the blacks were upset with, or was it the poor whites that were upset with the rich copper-colored people?
They were upset with the rich copper-colored people who owned everything around. This is why I brought up Solomon Jones' videos. He went through and showed the doctors, the lawyers, the hospitals, the oil fields that all were maintained and owned by copper-colored people. And those
that doesn't match, right? It don't match with the narrative that we brought millions of slaves over here. And so you're telling me the millions of slaves that you brought over here, allegedly, from Africa, was able to build sustaining cities and actually buildings that go even further back than slavery. Are you telling me that those were African slaves who built Tulsa?
No, they weren't.
That's what we're... Exactly.
They weren't.
So that's a good question. So when did Tulsa actually originate? Did it originate shortly after the Trail of Tears?
No. So the Trail of Tears story, that was another paper grab because everyone didn't leave the East going West. Some did. Some did. Most did. They accepted the term Negro to stay in place. And the laws that they created in Virginia, Carolina, D.C., that if you're going to stay, you're going to have to call yourself a Negro. And if you call yourself an Indian, we're going to persecute you. We're going to fine you and we're going to throw you in jail. So that's why the generations before us were not quick to talk about their Indian heritage because of the fear that retribution will come back to them.
And now that that makes so much more sense when people make fun of us sharing stories where we say auntie so-and-so, grandma so-and-so, grandpa, uncle told us these stories about us being American Indian people, that we were the Choctaw, we were the Cherokee, we were all these, we were part of the Powhatan Confederacy. The things that they were told is that to make fun of it as if it's something delusional that we're coming up with, but it is the oral history of the people passing it down as best they could. When you go back now and tie the 1921 massacre of Tulsa, which is an American Indian word, by the way, and pull it back to when the invasion started, it makes sense why our people were on edge about saying we're American Indian. Because of the slaughter and the being hunted in there. You can talk about going back, according to your documentation as an author of the Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy, you're talking about 1300s.
Mm-hmm.
We've been fought. They've been fighting us and warring against the American Indian. It didn't stop at some make-believe reservation. It's a war that is continuing to this day. And the people today that are most affected by that are people we know reclassified as African Americans or so-called black people. And now they're trying to say foundational. Yeah, we are the Aboriginal people of the land that have been fighting off occupation for hundreds of years.
That is the truth.
So the people in Tulsa, not having any African origin, were the original American Indians, as they would say, that were resurrecting themselves in an economic superiority on the land of their forefathers.
Yes, because they're from the soil. Our continued presence on this land is not by accident. We survived because we refused to be conquered. Generation after generation, indigenous people of America, those labeled Negro, colored, black, mulatto, now African American, held on to our identity, our memory, our land feeling, our lineage through resistance, not submission. We're still here because we never surrendered our spirit. No, people forget survival is not luck. It's resistance, it's identity, and it's blood memory. And that's what we're trying to open people's eyes to. You wouldn't be here if you weren't supposed to be here.
Can I read a quote from your book? Would that be okay?
Yes.
From Author Anew?
Yeah.
So this is from Jamil Samsonese, Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy, and it's on page 105, where you take a deep dive into the reported pre-Columbian era massacres beginning at 1325, right? And at the top, you made a quote referring to, or there was a referral to the war on drugs. And it says, the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it legal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. And who was that quote from, Chief Shadow?
Who was the quote from?
Errol Lickman. Is he there? I think.
Yep, I'm checking.
No signal.
That was Nixon.
Press input on your
That was
remote
Nixon.
control,
Lickman.
then select the
He just
function,
repeated it.
exit.
Yep.
And that was the best thing to put in the public view. And that's one of the things people fail to realize. We've seen this over and over. Be it time, be it lack of continuity of brain, thought. People open your mouth and say the wrong thing to the right person, and it'll get documented.
And you know, this is very serious that you're bringing this up, because here recently, over the past few years, the Jewish state has said the number one enemy towards them, or towards their state, is the young black populace of the United States. So
That's interesting by itself.
and that's here. That's in 2020s. Yeah, that's in the 2020s. And you know, when did that quote come out? That quote came out during Nixon's time. You said 1970s. Unbelievable. So Tulsa was extremely important because it was a hub of many other economic zones around the Americas. Is that not right?
That is correct.
Well, doesn't that make us now rethink the Great Depression and who the Great Depression was? Who was most affected by it, right? And why the Social Security Administration was developed at that time to help who? Think about what we're saying. So we have the Tulsa riot massacres, and you know, and all the ones that preceded that one. Up until that moment in that time, what came right after that? The Great Depression. And then what followed in social policy was the Social Security Administration.
And what saved most of those business were I hate to say it this way, but it was the black dollar that got reintroduced into the American United States economic flow, because Cadillac at that time was dying, the Ford was dying, and we started investing our money into them and brought them back to life.
Sure. Absolutely. And then there's jealousy. And then of seeing up, like you said, our prosperity. There's a reason for them to be angry, and that's why we have to again go back and just post huge holes in the out of Africa theory. And you know, they brought us, you know, it's out of Africa theory, and then you brought us from Africa. You know, it's just when you start to think about, you know, the things that they tell us, it's so illogical. But here we have, like you said, vibrant indigenous communities and a certain people who were surrounding us after they were pushed out of the mountains, because integration was the other way around. They were integrated into our areas. And that was through massacres first, right? You know, run as many of us out that they can and kill us off so they can just come in and assume, you know, deeds to our lands and stores.
Which is happening.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, because you say that integration, which is the whole theme of the 1960s. We won't talk about the 50s right now, but the whole theme of the 1960s with integration. And when so-called black society, the aboriginals or the original indigenous beings, when they went into the 60s, they held anywhere from 20 to 100 million hectares of land all around the country. And coming off of Black Wall Street, which was in 1921, that was the hub of all other Black Wall Streets that were all around the country that were extremely powerful. And if you can explain how these, I call it wars, they call it riots, right, were interacting and connected to the seriousness of the destruction of a whole entire civilization of economic power called Black Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
So to step on 2 points that you brought up. One, let's go back to the Jewish representative who made the statement about the young black Americans were the biggest threat. You must understand, everyone outside of that group are Goyim. Everyone, to include white Americans. People don't understand this.
Say that word again, Goyim?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into the word Goyim for just a second. We're going to just take a little pivot. What does Goyim mean?
They we are the creatures that was created. The Goyim.
Yeah, anybody who's not Jewish is Goyim. So why are we a threat to you?
Well,
There's a reason why we gonna bust it all out, because this is how we punch in holes in these theories and these lies about who's who and who's not who, because it's inverted and they kind of really tell on themselves.
Exactly.
You tell on yourself, like why we a problem.
I want the white Europeans now to listen to what's going on. I want those Africans to listen to what's going on. I want you down there in Australia to understand what's happening, especially you Asian people and the Canadians. Understand, you are Goyim to a certain population of people of Khazars.
Period. And if you accept their view, their way of destruction to everything else, then you're Goyim. Period.
And
to be destroyed.
So that's another very critical comment about that hole that needs to be bust wide open. And then it goes back to also the African slave hole. That punches a big hole in that theory that you still try to say you brought millions of people over here. Bottoms of ships beaten and tattered and chained and raped and ridiculed, and then all of a sudden set free in 1865, which we can talk about that when we go back to your timeline and show what was going on. Massacres were still going on.
But
right? That's crazy.
Yeah, I do want to mention, when you put chains on somebody, what do you call them? When you put chains on people, right? You go into war with them and you put a chain on them, what do they become? They become prisoners of war.
POWs.
Right?
Yeah.
They become prisoners of war. And then when you begin to start separating these prisoners of war and putting them into free labor camps, slave labor camps, right? You put them into think tank labor camps. You put them back on their own farms, because you got to remember, when they first came here, none of them knew how to farm. None of them knew how to raise and take care of waterways. None of them knew how to take care of anything in the backwoods or anything like that. They didn't know how to build anything. They didn't build any of this stuff.
But that's why we have to stop giving them so much powerful credit. So you mean to tell me y'all were massacring the Indians, who are supposed to be a separate group of people, making war with a whole other group of people, while rioting and Jim Crowing a whole other group of people? So you're telling me this one group of people they had the technology, the wherewithal, the power to be fighting three different groups of people, and those three different groups of people didn't come together and whoop their butts?
Well,
come on. Because it's all the same people.
and were those people kind of dark-skinned people, or were they?
You already know. Negro de Terra is in Supreme Court. What's the Supreme Court case? Samson.
What's that? Hall?
Yep.
Well, we need our Chief Justice on the phone.
Is it Hall versus the people versus Hall?
Oh, yeah.
What is it? 1854.
54. Yes.
It's in their own records. It's just people don't put the dots to bring the dots together. So that's why I'm thankful to have this platform with you and this wonderful book. Great. Because we are the storytellers of today, to have these platforms so we can now connect the dots. And there's no way you were fighting, massacring, and warring against three different types of and having world wars, having civil wars. Come on, and all that was going on, and you're telling me you're big and bad to fight off all them different types of... No, that's called an invasion. When you're invading indigenous...
7 nations.
Yes.
7 nations that came together to take the land.
Yes. It's the opposite other way around. The enslavement began here. That's another thing. You don't hear Native Americans ever talking about slavery. It's not in their old history. You don't ever really hear them talking about that. We can, but they just put a different face and name on it so you can stir us away from connecting those dots. But the enslavement began Here.
With us, Dr. Linford Fisher at Brown University proved that in his writings.
Yes.
And again, I don't call it enslavement. I call
5 million indigenous people went into bondage.
bondage,
Yes.
prisoners of war.
And that's right. There it is. The international term for that is prisoners
Prisoners of war. They want to say slavery because it seems like it makes them a little bit more powerful. It gives a different flavor or vibration to the psyche of a whole entire population that created most of the things on this planet, if not all the things on this planet, because there's nothing new under the sun. So they want to try to reduce that population to having nothing, being nothing, and having some sort of a other population that
It's a
came
little
over here.
static on the phone. Is that me? It's a little staticky. Oh, that's not me.
I don't hear static.
Sorry.
Do you hear static?
I don't hear it now.
Okay. Maybe this is hot conversation, though.
It could be. But I use the term prisoners of war because that's what we were.
Yeah,
And then broken off of that would be they placed us in free labor camps, and the free labor camps were our own farms that they forced us to farm for them, and some of it was even under our own supervision. And
Yes.
and a lot of these, and when I say under our supervision, they brought in a lot of what you had mentioned before, Slavs, to do the farming, to do the work, the cotton picking and stuff. They brought in a lot of those.
To tie that back together, this was the other side of it. The massacre, especially to Tulsa, the numbers they say are like 300. But what's been passed down were 3,000 because they were flying airplanes over top of them, shooting over 50 cal machine guns. They are about 5,000 troops. They're shooting them down in the street. There's a whole bunch of destruction that took place on property and life. One of the things that we have to remember, that was just the pinnacle of what we had just got out of, because there was the Red Summer incidents that took place that most people never talk about. Same things happened in 1919. And that's the thing that people don't want to talk about. There were at least 10 similar events. And those events happened because, unfortunately, we have a bunch of sellout people who were traveling at that time and telling them where we were prosperous at, where there was opportunity, where there was resources.
Yep.
And those people suffered from that. All skin folk ain't kinfolk. People are greedy.
And right before that, it was Wounded Knee.
There are a lot of
1890.
Flugerogs among us. Flugerogs among us.
And so now you said, so can you connect that dot a little bit more for us, Shadow? Because, so you're saying it's 1921 and 1919. Should go back, 20, 30 years. You're talking about 1890. The Massacre of Wounded Knee.
Yeah.
And nobody puts that together. So if that massacre happened, those are American Indians. And then 1919 happened, those are black people. 1921 happened, no, that was still the Indians. We just reclassified. Everybody will, you know what I'm saying? Like, people will relate the Wounded Knee as an Indian issue. Then how can 10, 20 years later, when you're still having the same type of massacres, now they're black people and now they're African? No, it's the same people.
Same people being tormented over and over because they had the resources. This is the thing that we don't tie together. If there were a mass slave injection into this country, we're talking from 1863 through early 1900s, say 1921. We're talking 60 years. In 60 years, this slave population would have amassed that much land and resources that people had to fight, kill, maim, injure, burn, take. There's no physical way that could have happened if these weren't the original people of the land.
And when would they have time? When would you,
Exactly.
as a slave, descendant of a slave had time to go build a prosperous city. And I'm talking about buildings that are older than the Civil War. And we're in those buildings and we're conducting business. When you look at the ancient structures that have been built onto or painted over in Chicago and all the major cities where we were bustling communities, how can you relate that to people coming off of a boat, in chains, enslaved, raped, pillaged, and then finally set free in 1850? When could we have built all of that? And I'm talking about the actual construction with the cement and the blocks and the engineering that it would take to make those buildings that we were conducting our business. When? Punch the holes in it. That's it.
And I'm glad you brought up the Civil War because it's now starting to come out that the Civil War wasn't what they depicted it to be, but it was more the Aboriginal Indigenous wars against the system to end the prisoner of war ship and to retain or get back a large part of our land in the South.
Can you clarify the years of the Civil War?
1861 to 1865.
All right. So in your book, can I read something from your book again?
Please.
So on page 124, we are now have moved into the mid-1800 massacres. You know, just had about 10 pages of massacres starting at 1325, and now we're in the middle of the 1860s. So you said, and everyone knows that historically the Civil War was between 1861 and it ended in 65 with us so-called the slaves being set free.
Yep.
Okay. So 1861, there are several massacres that were occurring. We have 1861, the Horse Canyon Massacre, where it says white settlers and Indian allies attacked a village in Horse Canyon and killing up to 240 Walakis. Then we have 1861 Cook's Canyon massacres. Apaches massacred hundreds of Americans and Mexicans in and around Cook's Canyon, New Mexico, over the course of several months. Hundreds murdered in that massacre. 1861, September 2nd, is the Galenas Massacre. 4 Confederate soldiers were killed by the Chiricahua Apache warriors, 4 soldiers. You have 1861, September 21, Fort Fauntleroy Massacre. Soldiers massacred between 12 and 20 Navajosit Fort Fauntleroy following a dispute over a horse race, and that was about 12 to 20 people. 1862, the Upper Station Massacre. California settlers killed at least 20 Walakis in Round Valley, California. 1862, Big Antelope Creek Massacre. California settlers led by notorious Indian hunter High Good launched a dawn attack on Yana Villas, massacring about 25 Indians. 1862, the August Kowonk Massacre. A posse of 25 California settlers killed 45 Concal Indians on their reservation in Round Valley, California. 1862, Dakota War of 1862. It says part of the U.S. Dakota War, the Sioux killed as many as 800 white settlers and soldiers throughout Minnesota, and some 40,000 white settlers fled their homes on the frontier. Now, this is supposed to be during the Civil War. 1862, an October massacre at Galena Springs. Soldiers under Captain James Graydon shot an alleged Mescalero leader who was approaching with his hand up as a sign of peace. 11 other Mescaleros were also killed, including women. 1862, the Tonkawa Massacre. That led up to killing 240 of the 390 Tonkawa, leaving only 150 survivors. 1863, Bear River Massacre. I mean, I can go on and on. Then dropping on down to 1864. You got Skull Valley Massacre. 1864, Sand Creek Massacre. 1865, Mud Lake Massacre. 1865, a squaw fight in the Grass Valley Massacre. 1865, the Owens Lake Massacre. White vigilantes attacked a Paiute camp on Owens Lake in California, killing around 40 men, women, and children. 1865, Three Knolls Massacre. White settlers massacred a Yana community at Three Knolls on the Mill Creek, California. 1865, September, the Bloody Point Massacre. 1866, the Circleville Massacre. 1867, Aquarius in the Aquarius Mountains. 1867, Kidder Massacre. 1868, Campo Seco. A posse of white settlers massacred 33 Yahis in the cave north of Mill Creek, California. 1868, September 24th Massacre at La Paz. 1868, November 27th, the Wichita Massacre. 1870, Marias Massacre. U.S. troops killed 173 Piegan, mainly women and children and elderly, after being led to the wrong camp by a soldier who wanted to protect his Indian wife's family. That's 173. 1871, Kingsley Cave Massacre. 4 settlers killed 30 Yali Indians in Tehama County, California, about 2 miles from the Wild Horse Corral in the Ishi Wilderness. It is estimated that the massacre left only 15 members of the Yahi tribe alive. 1871, Camp Grant Massacre. And isn't this at the time when the Congress said, no more diplomacy with the American Indians, and now we're taking them and now we're a corporation. That's in 1871. And then 1872, 1873, these massacres. 1889, Kevin Gray Massacre. 1890, Buffalo Gap Massacre. 1890, Stronghold. 1890, Wounded Knee Massacre. And then what did you say? The 1911 Massacre of the Shoshone. 4 Rangers. It says 8 Indians were killed during that. And that was in Nevada. And then what did you mention? 1919. What did you mention? 1921. Tulsa. What? It all goes together.
That's true.
That's profound. So the Indian massacres allegedly ends in 1911. Oh, but then we had another massacre in 1919, and then we have the Tulsa massacre in 1921. It's the same people.
They are.
And then you're talking about the Seminole Wars that started maybe about 20 years before that time period, which kicked into what they now know the Civil War. And remember, during that time, remember the Seminoles weren't named Seminoles. They were a collection of indigenous Indians that got together to defend themselves against the United States government. And the government, when they went back into quote unquote Florida, and that's why it's extremely important to know the map and what Florida was at that particular time. The Spaniards had ceded Florida back to the indigenous beings. And the Spaniards taught the Floridians how to fight that type of war, and combined with the natural abilities that they already had about fighting, with the new abilities that they gathered on how the people that they were fighting against were fighting, they never lost the war and fought themselves all the way into what we now know as Mexico. And then all of a sudden you get the Trail of Tears, and then you get all this other stuff going on. And they said that the reason why this prisoner of warship, quote unquote slavery, ended was not because of the Civil War, was because of the indigenous people rose up and put an end to it themselves. And this is the reason why.
Even putting an end to it, geez, you got to remember, they changed. So the difference is the riots are classified as riots because they didn't let them annihilate them. They fought back.
Correct. And I want the audience to understand something.
We never stop fighting these people. Every people want to act like we were just Indians and we just laid down and we just, we had our Trail of Tears with the blankets and all of that stuff. I'm like, bruh, that is not, man, we've been fighting these folks. Our ancestors have been fighting these folks. So you just said the wars, right? So go back to the Revolutionary War, the Chickamauga Wars and all of that. But guess what was going on during even the Revolutionary Wars? All these massacres.
And riots.
And riots.
Running at the same time.
Yes. Same people.
This is what we don't see. They run simultaneously. Riots, wars, and massacres ran along the same time period, showing that this was one people that was suffering the aggression of the world against them for their homeland. And
this mother Fletcher just passed away as one of the last surviving members of Tulsa in 100 years, and she has not seen a remedy for that atrocity.
No, and that's what I want people to understand that when you're hearing all of this, that the wars were still going on throughout the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and well into the 2000s. And that's the reason why, and that's the reason why in the 60s, it's important to note that when they were holding up lands, we own 20 to 100 million acres or hectares of land. Where do you think they got that land from? It's not on reservations that were stolen from our people. It was their land that they reclaimed during the time of chaos of what you now call the Civil War.
So guess what? Now you just punched like a cannonball hole in the African slave story. Because where did these brown people get the opportunity to own land coming out of slavery? How? How is it possible? Just tell me, where did you get the money from? Where would slaves, so-called African slaves that were brought here, allegedly, millions of them, right? Millions of them, and were held in bondage. This is a story that you got to teach it in the United States public schools, that the black folks were set free in 1865. Yet we have no history that any of our people ever got the 40 acres and a mule. So where did these brown people get the resources to have ownership of land?
Well,
I'm just saying.
Yep.
And that's post Civil War. But mind you, we all know through our own genealogy that our people owned land before the Civil War. So how is it that we were just slaves? Come on.
And it's also documented that the majority of African people, quote-unquote African people, over there from quote-unquote Africa, came in the 1960s when the moratorium was lifted.
And that's true. And so to encapsulate that even more with the slave story that they told, I did some research on it. I actually did a video on it about 6 months ago. I went back through their database. In the whole of their slavery, we use the date 1492 to 1865, I put in only 23 slaves disembarked into the continental United States through Ellis Island. Only 23. And all of them escaped except for one who bought themselves out. So where are the millions? You have millions of Indians who were taken from America, taken to the Middle Passage, and were brought back as slaves. But there is a romanticism that's associated with slavery, victimhood. And unfortunately, most people, instead of embracing their indigenous heritage, because maybe they don't want to associate the thought that it was taken from them, it was easier to be a victim than it is to be someone who was slicked out of their land.
You know, Shadow, one of the things that I've always thought about all the slavery garbage was that they put imposters amongst us
I'm so happy you said that word, imposters.
to fan
Go
those
ahead.
stories.
I'll expound in a second, but I'm just so happy because we're gonna drop some more cannonballs. Go ahead, sir. I'm gonna just expound on it after you're done.
Just to fan the slave narrative that you came from nothing. Because they don't want you to see the millions of mounds that were here, that were here, hundreds of thousands of them that were destroyed, the thousands upon thousands of pyramids, castles, star forts that were impossible for them to build. One right now, a very small star fort in New York that the Statue of Liberty is sitting on, that they filled in. I mean, you just take a look at the pictures there, and you can see how huge that thing is compared to a human being. So yes, I think they brought in a lot of flugerods, imposters, created beings that mixed in with our population purposely to bring us down, to keep us in a state of a low-dimensional mindset, and always hoping and wishing and praying for some savior to come that they created.
Well, guess what though? That fits what you said about bringing in imposters. So let's go back and review for 1 second. You said, Chief Shadow, that when you looked in the database, you said what year was it?
I used the dates of 1492 to 1865.
Okay. And then Chief Anu said most of their population, or the so-called African population through immigration, was around 1960, right? You said around 1960. Now let's go ahead and deep dive into 1960. All right, so we all know 1960 is the infamous, civil rights, right? Leading up into the civil rights. All right. So leading up into the civil rights, which led right into the outcome of the civil rights, was the war on drugs. Right? Now think about what you said, that when they really started coming in as immigrants is around 1960. Think about keep 1960s, keep 1965, the whole civil rights movement, which culminated in the war on drugs, which now we know was managed by the Black Congressional Caucus, which was founded in 1971. Right. So you're bringing in these Africans, you're going to establish this Black Congressional Caucus, which basically managed the war on drugs against our people. And you brought Africans in to infiltrate into our communities, especially the urban communities. This is who they used to begin the war on drugs. By first of all pretending that we were rampant drug dealers in our communities, which we were not. And you infiltrated Africans into our communities. But it didn't just start in the communities. They had started infiltrating them within in between the civil rights movement. Africans were in there. Replacement people were in there. Imposters were in there. COINTELPRO-ops were in there among them. Because I remember, I don't know who was it that was reminiscing on when Martin Luther King was shot. But something interesting he mentioned about an African reporter that was allegedly supposed to be present. So the African infiltration began before the war on drugs, but it's an outset of the civil rights movement when our people were being infiltrated. And they used Africans to begin this foothold of this alleged war on drugs. When was our people taking drugs like that? Think about When will we just, rampantly killing each other and why would that start like that?
Well, we weren't, because what happened is that during the end of the 60s, going into the 70s, this is when they began to start pushing welfare. This is when they start pushing prostitution. This is when they start pushing heroin on our people, bringing them into the neighborhoods, and then this is when they began to start again taking away the land and businesses of quote unquote indigenous males. And when
we would no longer come together.
That's right.
We would no longer come together in mass numbers.
That was integration, though, more than anything.
Yeah.
Once we integrated, we didn't need our own because we can use theirs. Not knowing that the trick was to stop us from being self-dependent.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, the movement coming out of the 50s going into the 60s was decolonization,
yes.
not integration.
Yes.
Right? And they infiltrated that with a whole bunch of Jesus. And forgive me, people out there, when I say this, but it seems like every time you put that God involved, all kinds of craziness starts to happen. But when they started putting all those preachers in there and stuff like that, and they started going against their own people, these again were integrated flugerods, created people, and people who had turned against their own indigenous people, like Jesse Jackson, and of alike, to get us out of the mindset of independence and going back into our own land, returning back to who we are, and into, like they're saying, integration. That's
yeah. So instead of the so-called black leaders of the time who knew all about the decolonization act of 1961, so was a resolution in 1514 about how, like you said, we could decolonize.
And isn't it interesting that they
didn't
never
get that,
once
though, from our leadership. Our leadership didn't do that.
Never once did anybody ever mention that. Not even Malcolm X, really. Right? Everybody, none of these leaders in this war mentioned decolonization when the whole entire planet, so-called planet, and its indigenous populations, lands were being returned back to the indigenous people from the colonials.
Well, I want to kick something in there. You just said, and this is, I think, was one of the main reasons why Malcolm X got assassinated. Because when he parted from the truth, he actually went to the lands of Egypt, and he started learning who we were, because he came back and he started speaking to that, saying, you are the aboriginal. You don't want to be called aboriginal. You want to be called American. Ha, 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 ha. Remember that?
Yep. That's right. He said every aboriginal you find are our skin aboriginals, dark skin aboriginals. You never find a white aborigine. Yeah, and again, when you talk about 1492 all the way up until the 60s, when you begin to start breaking down the quote unquote people coming in from Africa, it's less than 100 people a year. That's serious.
Well,
here's another thing. I'm sorry, Dad.
Go ahead.
Here's another thing. Another cannonball in the story. So, where are all these millions of slaves being brought over here, right? And today, fast forward to today, to think of all the foreign aid that the United States, through our resources, gives to African nations, right?
Right.
So, if you were able, allegedly, as slaves, to come over here and build these vibrant cities that the United States, and their citizens and immigrants decided to destroy through all these massacres, then shouldn't that be the same type of cultural evolution that's happening in Africa?
They were the same people.
If you're saying we're the same people that the great Africans built America. Not only did Africans build America because they're the first people, because everybody's out of Africa theory, how that works with the land bridge, but, see how they trick us with things? You want to say that there's your out of Africa theory, but it's a land bridge theory that determines the ethnicity of the American Indian. But what happened to out of Africa? But out of Africa only, they bring that back in to say that we're, us the copper colored people are the Africans, but then how is that just the land bridge? See, it's these tricks. But the question is, how is it that our so-called Africans were brought over here in millions in boats and slaves to build up this great metropolis and cities that we did have, but yet does not reflect what's allegedly what they show us that is in Africa? And the United States does pay foreign aid to nations there. Why?
Well, they're paying them off.
They're not the same people.
No, and they're paying them off.
Of course,
Yeah.
and they're not the same people. If you could develop everything over here, if you develop Black Wall Street over here, then that's what should be over there. You should, and remember, it's in your country where you're not being inundated, allegedly, by colonization. So you should have a whole bunch of Black Wall Streets over there. That's what should be there. You shouldn't need aid from us. You shouldn't need aid from this country.
That's a fact.
All I'm saying, according to how the revised story that we're given, it doesn't match up.
So I want the people out there to understand, again, just to back up what she's saying, they never found any real slave ships except a sliver of wood here in a lake that's not attached to any ocean. And if you take a look at the North Carolinian slave trade, you'll find out that all of the prisoners of war were coming from the Americas. And it was wrapped around what you now call the Caribbean islands. And Jamaica, as an island, was a refuge to a lot of the quote-unquote Black Irish. And that's where a lot of those Black Irish went, and that's the reason why they have the accents that they have, because the people that are over there in Ireland had the accents of their masters that they kicked out, right? Because the Moors lost. But anyway, that's a whole nother story too.
But can I just add one more thing to that, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I wanted to read. I just wanted to kind of end my portion in reading a couple more of these massacres. Can I go just read a couple of them? I want to show you the ones that from Sampson's book, Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy, starting at 1325. Is that okay?
Yeah, because that 1325 it's very interesting, when you start talking about, 1492. Now you pre, and we're into this thing called the so-called Cherokee massacring the mountain people. It's getting kind of interesting here. So we're at 58 minutes. So we're going to go for an hour, but let's finish what we're talking about here.
So I just want to read a couple of the names of the massacres and the amount of people. So when people, when you want to figure out how it happened, or at least how the downfall of us began, it started hundreds and hundreds of years ago of this invasion, on our shores, and hundreds to thousands and millions of us that were murdered and enslaved as prisoners of war, leading all the way up to today. But if you think about how long it took for to be battling against belligerent occupiers, wanting to take over our land, now we can see where our mindsets are coming from, where some of the fear, a lot of the fear was coming from. We have 1325 is the Crow Creek Massacre, and that was in Chamberlain, South Dakota. That has 486 of indigenous peoples. 1539, the Patuca Massacre, 200 were executed by Hernando de Soto, resisting. That was from the Timucuan warriors. We have a 1540 Mobilla Massacre, 200. It says 2,000 500, and this was talking about soldiers that were killed. This is the Choctaw retaliated against Hernando de Soto's expedition, killing 200 soldiers. So we weren't laying down, letting anybody just come in this land and do us any type of way. We were fighting these people and knocking them off too. We're knocking them off as well. 1541 to 42, the Tigwix massacres. And this was after the invading Spaniards seized houses, food, and clothing of the Tigwa and raped their women. This is where the stories are coming from in our history when it comes to that, but it's the other way around. It's what you did to us, invading us. And the Tigwa resisted. The Spanish attacked them, burning at the stake 50 people who had surrendered. And it says Francisco Vasquez, Hernando's men, laid siege to the Mojo Pueblo, and after a months-long siege, they killed 200 fleeing warriors. Then we have 1599, January 22nd through the 24th, the Acoma Massacre. Battling in Acoma Pueblo, killing approximately 800 natives. 1621, the Sandia Mountains. Tampiro Indians, 900 are massacred. 1610, 1622 Jamestown Massacre. 1623, the Wessagesset Affair. 1623 again, the Pamunkey Peace Talks. Now this is disgusting. The English poisoned the wine at a peace conference with Powhatan leaders, killing about 200. They physically attacked and killed another 50. That's 1623. While they claimed they were bringing over millions of African slaves. 1637, during the Pequot War, there were 30 foreign squatters that were killed, men, women, and children. So these battles are going back and forth. 1637, the Mystique Massacre. 1640, Staten Island. 1643, Pavonia Massacre. 1643, the Hutchinson Massacre. That was New Netherlands. 1644, 1655, 1675. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it was government leaders, it was governors who were put in to replace Obers that was, giving the green light for murdering our people by the hundreds. So this has been a long time of murder against our people. Massacre at Oconee Island. Nathaniel Bacon turned on his Occaneechi allies, and his men destroyed 3 forts within their village on Occaneechi Island on the Roanoke River near present-day Clarksville, Virginia. Bacon's troops murdered 100 men, women, and children. Then it's the Turner Massacre in Massachusetts. So look at the lands, Rhode Island, it's all over the country, from west to east. And we're talking about going back as far as the 1300s.
And say that one more time, going back as far as how long?
The 1300s.
And who
beginning
came
with the Crow Creek Massacre? That was a prequel. It's probably more than that.
And who came over here and did what? The Spaniards?
Yep.
And who was in control of the Spanish lands in Europe in 1300? Was it what they now call the Renaissance period, the Moors? Were the Moors were the kings and queens of Europe at that particular time, mixed in with some quote-unquote Hebrews, which we now know Hebrews mean mixed people that came across the sea, which could have been from the Americas itself. But that being said, these people are not the people who people think they are in history.
Nope.
They were people who look like the indigenous people that were already here. And this is why they had such an easy time infiltrating into certain societies within our civilization, which was worldwide.
And anchoring themselves with our women, forcing.
Yep. So now what we have is that during this period of time, it wasn't a certain other race of people that came here, which was a created race of people called. They created that terminology white. They may not existed during that time. They were black-headed Europeans that were over here attacking us, that invading us. Marco Polo in the Prester John series was mentioning that there was a major war between the indigenous Americans and what they now call Genghis Khan over here in the Americas up towards 12, I think it was the year 1200. He was saying that 1250 or something like that, which isn't too far off from having these other people coming over here doing the same thing. Cousins upon cousins attacking the people who they know are God within. This was a war, a world war that they don't talk about against the indigenous people, the original beings of the planet that try to take their place. That's my feeling. I don't know how you guys feel about that. What's the end of our conversations? But just please elaborate.
I support everything you just said.
And the piece is that, a lot of this is brown on brown crimes against humanity, and gatekeepers among ourselves, and then also replacement people who share the same skin tone. So there's a lot of layers to the invasion and the eventual recasting us as a suspect class of people. It's a lot of layers that goes into it. But the important thing is to begin to connect those dots, that you want to understand that the conflicts that the so-called black people have today in America, it stems from our the battle for our lives here when we were being invaded.
And Tulsa is a great example of that invasion and how powerful we are as beings of people. Because when you're scraping from nothing and then can reestablish yourself so quickly around the whole entire continental America, it goes to say about the power of what we had and what we knew about ruling the lands that we were in before they came as a civilization. But before we go, I didn't talk about you are the chief of the Coosa Nation State. Could you just elaborate on that just a little bit? And Chief White, Chief Shadow, could you please also elaborate on your position as well?
Okay, yes, I'm Chief Sahani Boogie Valley, which is Blue Feather, Dr. Monique Tate, and I am the principal chiefess for Coosa Nation, the state of North America, and the as spokesperson for our juridical personality. And basically, the work that our nation does nationwide is facilitating safe passage and right of return for our people who desire to acknowledge their American Indian heritage and want to move forward by returning to, sacredly who we are. So what we do as a critical personality is that we advocate and fight for our rights to be free and live in peace and safety. So we just do our best to try to help our brothers and sisters in similar situations to assist us with any, cases where we're criminalized or our children are taken, or just the regular way of life for us here under occupation, and doing our best to educate our generations, which we have our own academy, and we just continue to do outreach.
Budding Star Seeds.
Budding Star Seed Academy, yes. And our fifth year, we're so excited, and we have adopted Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy, and we do have a special fire circle coming up right before winter solstice. So now I guess I have to let it out a little bit, Shantanine. We want to officially, in a ceremony, acknowledge that we have adopted your book as our historical text for our curriculum. We're very excited.
Wow.
very excited about that.
Now, I want the world to know that Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy is an excellent historical document written by the guest that we have on today, Shadow, and he'll talk about that. But it's imperative that every person should have this in their library because the truth is hard to find, and it's also more disturbing than the lie. Shadow,
No
please.
signal. Press
Alright.
on your remote
So,
control.
I'm
Then
Chief
select
Shadow Wolf, Wyatt
HDMI1.
of the Coosa Nation. I am the Marshal, i.e. the War Chief of Coosa Nation. And my role is to try to bring peace and harmony through the great law of peace to our nation. I'm also an author. We've been talking about my book, Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy. And my second book, I Told You Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy, which separates out the wars and massacres because of their importance to how we lost everything that we have. I shared with you the image of me using a geotagged program to outlay all the directions of the wars, riots, and massacres that were waged against our people and how we ended up through miseducation and assimilation into the society that we are today. Most notably, I have to say that the African story is more digestible than the truth. And as long as that thought process stays in someone's head, you have to let them believe what they believe. Those who know from within will accept it, and those you'll find will be your people.
It's an amazing thing that we have a restoration of minds that actually are not afraid to speak the truth and bringing the truth out because, like you said, the truth is more disturbing than the lie. And people rather digest the lie and stay in the matrix. This has been a great show. We have to do it again and have another one. I would say this is part one of a longer conversation to get into who were the Cherokee, and who are the real original Aboriginal Americans, and what more does Coosa do in terms of Coosa Nation State do in terms of the Council of Nine? What is that? Where did it come from? Who do they support? And all of the other legal battles that we're fighting on a front for return back to the civilization that we have. And any last words from each of you?
I just want to say mahalo and Anita, great gratitude for the opportunity to be able to come on, like you said, and synthesize our creative minds so that, in our generation, we're doing our part, in our soul mission to ensure that the story of our ancestors and our sacred duty here as the caretakers of Earth, of Hanuna, that we're still here. We are determined. We are determined to move forward in sacredness as Earth caretakers and pave a way for our generations to not have to repeat the past or live in, the wishy-washy conundrum of racial reclassification. They're free to be the creative spirits that they are. So, and thank you and our brother Shadow for walking this path together.
Most appreciated. And Shadow, any last words?
Yes. Remember, the spirit that guided our ancestors through genocide, displacement, and erasure is the same spirit that lives within you today, undefeated, uncolonized, and forever eternal.
Well, I thank both of you for being here. And it is very, very amazing that we are living in the times that we're in, able to witness the things that we're witnessing. And I'm very, very grateful to be able to work alongside the awakening and people who had actually not only woke up, not waking up, but are waking up a whole nother entire generation of people, getting them to understand who and what they are. My greatest appreciations to both of you. Thank you so much. And mahalo to you.
Mahalo, Kumail.